What if I showed you a time machine? Scandinavian winters have always been known for their harshness, biting winds, and seemingly endless snowfalls. In these northern lands, the cold season lasted for most of the year, plunging the world into a long and oppressive darkness. Temperatures regularly dropped to critical levels, turning water into solid ice. Violent storms from the sea brought moisture that froze instantly on absolutely any surface. In such extreme conditions, human survival depended entirely on reliable and very warm shelter. A sturdy house had to successfully withstand the raging elements for long and agonizing months. The architecture of the ancient northern peoples developed in inseparable connection with the icy and utterly impenetrable nature. People learned to masterfully use thick logs, clay, and even a thick layer of turf to insulate their dwellings. Thick smoke from a constant fire rose under the high roof, creating a dense thermal cushion there. It was a harsh but incredibly well-designed dwelling, where every detail served the single purpose of survival. Watch the video to the end, and you'll learn how the Vikings slept and stayed warm in their smoky longhouses. I'll reveal the best-kept secret. Building a sturdy dwelling began with carefully selecting the right spot on the windswept coast. Craftsmen always sought out small elevations that ensured natural drainage of spring meltwater. Wooden beams were laid on a massive stone foundation, insulating the floors from the frozen ground. This design allowed the interior microclimate to be maintained even during the harshest winter months. Northern builders primarily used oak or pine, which are known for their high density and durability. Each log was carefully hewn with axes so that the elements fit as tightly as possible against one another. The gaps between the logs were caulked with dry moss, clay, and special resin compounds. This created a virtually airtight enclosure, preventing icy drafts from penetrating the interior. The massive walls served as a kind of thermal accumulator, slowly releasing the heat accumulated during the day. Doorways were intentionally made low and narrow to minimize the loss of precious heated air. A person had to bend down significantly upon entering, which also served as a precaution against sudden intrusions. A small covered vestibule was often built in front of the main door, acting as a thermal airlock. Cold air from the street was trapped in this vestibule, preventing it from immediately entering the living area. Such architectural tricks helped maintain a comfortable temperature inside without wasting fuel. Floors in longhouses were usually a tightly packed, level earthen surface. The earth absorbed heat from the central hearth and carefully retained it throughout the night. In sleeping areas, wooden planks were laid over the ground for additional thermal insulation. The space between the ground and the boards was tightly packed with dry grass or soft moss. This multi-layered system reliably protected people from the biting cold coming from below. Building such a large-scale structure required the efforts of the entire community and took a long time. Craftsmen passed down the secrets of woodworking and stone masonry from generation to generation. Every detail of the house had its own strictly defined purpose and vital function. Its outward simplicity concealed a complex engineering concept, honed over centuries of harsh practice. The dwelling became the center of the universe for the Scandinavians, a shelter from storms and icy hardships. Every architectural solution devised by the northern craftsmen was aimed at conserving energy and heat. The longhouse was the perfect machine for survival in extreme climatic conditions. The ability to use natural materials and the surrounding landscape made these structures truly unique. I'd love to hear your thoughts. What do you think about these construction techniques? Share your thoughts in the comments and be sure to subscribe to the channel. What if everything you were taught is outdated? The center of any longhouse was always an open fire burning in a special deep recess. This hearth stretched almost across the entire central part of the structure, providing uniform, intense heat. The stone surround prevented the destructive flames from spreading to the wooden floor and wall structures. The fire was kept burning continuously from late autumn until the onset of the short northern summer. The hearth served several vital functions in the complex daily life of the Scandinavian peoples. It was the sole source of heat and light, as well as a place for preparing hot, hearty meals. The stones surrounding the hearth would heat up during the day and slowly give off life-saving warmth at night. People would gather around this source of energy to warm themselves after hard physical labor. The fire going out was considered a serious threat to the entire settlement during the frosty winter months. Open flames required strict precautions to prevent accidental and catastrophic fires. An additional protective barrier of wet sand or dense clay was often built around the central pit. Sparks flying from the fire were instantly extinguished on this protective layer before reaching the wooden floorboards. A careful attitude toward fire was instilled in the inhabitants of the harsh north from their earliest years. The safety of the entire longhouse depended entirely on the strict discipline of each of its inhabitants. On the coldest winter nights, the hearth was stoked more intensely, turning it into a long wall of fire. The heat radiating from such a powerful source penetrated deep into the farthest corners of the wooden dwelling. Stone slabs, heated to extremely high temperatures, functioned as highly effective radiators. Even in the bitterest frosts, the temperature inside allowed people to stay there without heavy outer clothing. The ability to masterfully control the element of fire was the key to a successful and safe winter. Special wooden benches were set up along the long hearth where people spent hours resting. The distance from the fire to these benches was calculated to ensure maximum comfort. Sitting too close risked severe burns, while sitting too far away failed to provide the necessary soothing warmth. The wooden backs of the massive benches were often decorated with intricate geometric carvings and ancient runic patterns. The warmth of the fire created an atmosphere of indescribable coziness and absolute security in the harsh Scandinavian world. The importance of the central open hearth to early Viking culture simply cannot be overstated. It was the beating heart of the home, giving life itself and saving people from the icy breath of the merciless winter. Sophisticated engineering and harsh practical experience came together in the design of this mechanism. How difficult do you think it was to keep such a fire burning continuously for months on end? In the next chapter, you'll learn how the inhabitants of these homes dealt with the consequences in the form of thick smoke. The hidden truth that everyone keeps quiet about lies in the unique design of the wooden chimney right under the roof. An open, powerful fire inevitably produced a huge amount of acrid smoke and black, greasy soot. If the smoke remained inside the enclosed space, it would have been physically impossible to stay there. Architects of the harsh Viking era developed a unique system of passive aerodynamic ventilation to solve this problem. Smoke was drawn out through specially calibrated openings in the ridge at the highest point of the wooden longhouse. Be sure to like this video if you're interested in the real daily life of the ancient, rugged Scandinavians. The ventilation openings were located directly above the central hearth to ensure maximum stable draft. Heated indoor air, along with smoke, rose rapidly upward according to the immutable laws of physics. Thanks to this process, the air at human height remained relatively clean and perfectly breathable. In the event of heavy snowfall or hurricane-force winds, these openings were partially covered with movable wooden shields. Adjusting these shutters allowed heat to be retained while preventing critical and dangerous smoke buildup in the living space. A long Scandinavian house always had a persistent, deep smell of burnt wood and aromatic smoked meats. This pungent aroma deeply permeated coarse clothing, woven fabrics, and the wooden elements of the complex structure. Thick gray smoke constantly gathered right under the ceiling, forming a kind of dark, impenetrable veil. Items hung from the ceiling to dry were quickly covered with a thick, even layer of soot and smoke residue. However, it was precisely this dense layer of smoke that created an additional insulating air barrier, preventing heat from escaping. To ensure that acrid smoke did not get into their eyes, people tried to sit as low as possible. Wooden benches and spacious couches were placed at a low height above the solid earthen floor. When moving around the vast house, it was also strongly recommended to crouch slightly to avoid entering areas of heavy smoke. Breathing at waist level was much more comfortable and physiologically safer for human health. This harsh feature of daily life permanently shaped the residents' movements and daily habits. Dry birch firewood was considered the best choice for minimizing the release of heavy soot into the living space. It burned exceptionally evenly and cleanly, constantly releasing a huge amount of life-saving thermal energy. Wet, unseasoned wood or resinous spruce branches were used only as a last resort due to the heavy, thick smoke they produced. Preparing high-quality winter fuel took up a significant portion of the short, warm Scandinavian season. Long stacks of dried wood were carefully and securely sheltered from the heavy autumn rains and winter snow. In some large houses, the ventilation openings in the ceiling were supplemented by small wooden pipes that extended high above the roof. This design created an additional pressure differential and greatly enhanced the extraction of smoke from the room. The pipes were reliably protected by carved wooden visors that prevented snow from falling directly into the open, burning hearth. Air turbulence above the roof drew out stagnant smoke with truly remarkable aerodynamic efficiency. The engineering intuition of the ancient Scandinavian builders allowed them to effortlessly solve the most complex challenges of the northern climate. The struggle against the icy cold and acrid smoke shaped their unique, practical approach to spatial design. The passive ventilation system was no less important than the incredibly strong walls or the reliable stone foundation. Like this video to support the release of new, exciting historical investigations on our channel. Are you ready for the shocking truth? The walls of a longhouse were never just smooth wooden panels, as many mistakenly believe. The inner surface of the thick walls was often completely covered with woven mats made of dry reeds or dense straw. These voluminous mats created a life-saving air gap that prevented direct contact between the icy wood and the indoor air. The additional layer of organic, porous material excellently and long-lastingly retained thermal energy within the comfortable living space. In the coldest northern regions, walls could be further lined with thick animal hides or very dense woolen fabrics. This multi-layered textile barrier functioned exactly like modern, high-tech, multi-layered thermal clothing. Heavy fabrics blocked even the slightest cold drafts penetrating through microscopic invisible cracks in the massive wooden log structure. The vast interior of the house became completely soundproof and incredibly well protected from the whims of the freezing outside world. Using high-quality textiles for insulation required a tremendous amount of manual labor and precious woven materials. The outer defensive earthen ramparts surrounding the house were regularly renewed and carefully reinforced just before the onset of winter. Fresh sod was carefully cut from distant meadows and laid very tightly in high rows along the log walls. Over time, the plant's root systems became tightly intertwined, transforming the protective rampart into a monolithic, impenetrable shield. This structure not only excelled at retaining heat, but also protected the wood from the destructive effects of autumn moisture. The high earthen embankment served as the most reliable barrier against the icy and merciless northern storms. During the harshest and snowiest winters, the enormous house could be almost completely buried in white snow. The thick blanket of snow acted as the perfect free natural insulation, completely blocking any heat loss. Inside the resulting giant snowdrift, The sturdy wooden walls reliably maintained a comfortable, above-freezing temperature for weeks on end. All the inhabitants had to do was regularly and diligently clear the path to the door and the ventilation openings on the high roof. Snow unexpectedly became not a cruel enemy, but the most reliable ally in the daily struggle for collective survival. The interior wooden flooring on the earthen floor also played a vital and irreplaceable role in the overall heating system. A thick layer of dry river or sea sand was often poured between the icy earthen foundation and the smooth planks. The sand quickly absorbed radiant heat from the central hearth and then evenly warmed the solid wooden floorboards. Walking on such a warm floor was incredibly comfortable, even without thick winter boots or stockings. The multi-layered ingenious floor construction permanently isolated the frozen deep soil from the warm living space. In some special cases, additional interior partitions made of smooth, thin boards were erected along the exterior walls. Absolutely dry moss or fine sawdust was tightly packed between the main load-bearing wall and this new partition. This unique technology of double insulated walls long anticipated the emergence of modern, popular frame houses with insulation. The effectiveness of this complex method allowed for incredible savings of scarce wood fuel during the long, dark winter months. The fundamental engineering knowledge of the northern peoples was always formed exclusively through trial and error and harsh life lessons. Coniferous tree resin, brewed according to a special secret recipe, was frequently and widely used as a reliable sealant. All suspicious cracks and complex joints in massive wooden structures were thickly coated with hot, boiling resin. This was a true historical victory of the human mind over the merciless and destructive forces of Scandinavian wilderness. But how exactly were sleeping quarters organized in this warm yet heavily smoke-filled interior? In the next chapter, we will examine in detail the design of beds and enclosed sleeping platforms from that remarkable era. Inside the huge longhouse, the space for rest and sleep was organized with maximum practicality and strict adherence to the laws of physics. Private sleeping areas were located in specially designated spots along the long walls, away from the noisy central passageway. Very often, the beds consisted of deep, built-in wooden niches, vaguely resembling spacious wardrobes without the usual doors. These enclosed niches created a unique, self-contained microclimate in which the body's heat was retained much longer than usual. Solid wooden panels reliably protected sleepers from accidental icy drafts and the radiating cold of the exterior load-bearing walls. The warmest and most comfortable spots were always in the central third of the enormous house, as close as possible to the burning hearth. It was here that the spacious beds of the house's master and the most influential honored members of the vast northern community were situated. The gentle warmth from the constant roaring fire warmed these deep alcoves far better than any additional architectural tricks. Places near the cold end walls were traditionally reserved for people of lower social status and ordinary workers. The distribution of sleeping areas vividly reflected the very strict hierarchy of Scandinavian society in that distant and harsh era. The beds themselves were very massive wooden boxes, tightly packed with the finest natural insulating and soft materials. A thick, even layer of completely dry straw, fragrant hay, or soft heather was always laid at the bottom of the deep box. This thick, organic cushion provided the necessary softness and served as an excellent, impermeable barrier against the cold wooden floor. On top of the straw, the thickest woolen blankets or superbly tanned thick hides of northern fur-bearing animals were always laid. Such a multi-layered warm bed guaranteed a very comfortable sleep even during a sharp drop in indoor temperature. Built-in enclosed beds were often richly decorated with intricate, deep carvings depicting ancient mythological scenes or austere geometric patterns. These beautiful designs served not only as exquisite aesthetic adornments, but also fulfilled the vital function of sacred protective talismans. Skilled craftsmen poured their entire soul, and the practical northern experience accumulated over many generations into the creation of this furniture. All protruding wooden parts were very carefully sanded to completely avoid painful splinters and damage to expensive textiles. The furniture was carefully passed down through a long line of inheritance, serving faithfully for many decades without the slightest functional complaint. For people of the lowest social status, very simple wooden benches along the central hearth served as sleeping places. At night, old animal skins or very coarse, prickly woolen fabrics were simply thrown over these hard benches. The proximity to the open, hot fire partially compensated for the complete absence of insulated wooden walls and fabric curtains. Sleeping on the narrow benches was far less comfortable, but the intense heat of the fire reliably ensured survival on a frosty night. In the huge, long house, every person was sure to find a place for themselves in strict accordance with their status. The design of these sleeping quarters brilliantly demonstrates the ancient people's profound understanding of the laws of heat exchange and basic ergonomics. They were exceptionally skilled at creating incredible comfort from the simplest, roughest, and most readily available natural northern materials. A wooden enclosed bed was not just an ordinary piece of furniture, but a true little fortress within a vast fortress. The perfect thoughtfulness of every minute detail allowed people to survive and rest fully in extreme climatic conditions. Sleeping in a wooden longhouse was the most important daily ritual for fully recharging one's strength before a new, incredibly difficult day. The secret, passed down from generation to generation, lies in the unique processing of coarse northern natural wool. In the face of an incredibly harsh climate, the correct and knowledgeable selection of textiles played the most crucial role in preserving precious body heat. Nightwear differed significantly from the everyday heavy-duty clothing designed for hard labor or long military campaigns. For a peaceful night's sleep, long, loose-fitting shirts made of undyed sheep's wool or very coarse natural flax were always used. These high-quality materials absorbed excess moisture quickly and effectively, allowing the skin to breathe freely even under incredibly heavy woolen blankets. Ancient weaving craftsmanship in the distant Viking era undoubtedly reached an incredibly high and remarkable level of technological development. Women from the vast community spent long, dark winter evenings at massive vertical looms, creating incredibly dense and warm fabrics. High-quality fabric, masterfully woven from a special double thread that provided phenomenal and absolute thermal insulation, was in particularly high demand everywhere. The intricate handcrafted production of a single high-quality winter quilt required many months of painstaking, incredibly monotonous, and exhausting labor. This thick, high-quality fabric completely blocked out cold drafts and very effectively trapped all the warm air generated by the human body. A protective layer of air always remained between the clean bottom sheets made of coarse linen and the heavy top fur blankets. It was precisely this warm, still air that was invariably the most important secret to maintaining a comfortable temperature during a long night's sleep. The human body quickly warmed this small volume, and the clever, multi-layered bedding completely prevented the life-saving warmth from dissipating into the vast, cold space of the house. In such a warm capsule, a weary person could rest in absolute peace, fully restoring all their strength after hard, exhausting physical labor. The art of making the bed properly and warmly was carefully and strictly passed down from adult mothers to their young daughters over many centuries. During the harshest and most bitter frosts, smooth stones heated in advance by a hot hearth were always placed in the cold bed. These excellent natural heat packs were wrapped very tightly in thick, coarse fabric to completely prevent accidental severe burns. The red-hot stones very slowly and evenly released their accumulated intense heat throughout the long, endless northern night. This incredibly simple and astonishingly effective ancient method allowed one to warm up very quickly and reliably even in the coldest of nighttime beds. The use of intensely heated objects was an absolutely universal and vital survival practice in harsh, unbearable climatic conditions. To ensure maximum insulation, long nightshirts were very often tightly cinched with special, sturdy woven belts. This simple action prevented any loss of warm air through the wide hem and created a perfect closed thermal loop around the entire body. The narrow, long sleeves fit very tightly around the wrists, completely preventing the icy outdoor air from entering the warm nightwear. Every minute detail of this specific nightwear was strictly and uncompromisingly dedicated to a single purpose: preserving precious vital energy. Winter clothing worked in perfect tandem with heavy bedding, providing the maximum absolute level of thermal protection. Special warm felt stockings were invariably a very important and absolutely indispensable element of northern nighttime comfort. High-quality felt, skillfully crafted by long-term fulling of sheep's wool, possessed truly outstanding thermal insulation properties and incredible softness. High-quality warm clothing and incredibly thick blankets were no less essential to survival than the astonishingly sturdy log walls of the longhouse. In brilliant combination with ingenious architectural solutions, they created a virtually impenetrable, reliable shield against the dreadful northern icy frosts. A massive loom was just as incredibly important a tool of the era as a battle axe or a heavy blacksmith's hammer. How heavy do you think such enormous multi-layered fur blankets were? In the next chapter, we'll learn how the living tree itself helped the resourceful Scandinavians preserve precious warmth in an incredible way. Wood has always been the most important and reliable ally of northern builders in their constant struggle against the icy, biting winds. The unique physical properties of wood make it the absolutely ideal natural material for creating the most reliable and durable thermal insulation. The porous natural structure of logs contains millions of tiny microscopic air pockets that brilliantly block any transfer of outdoor temperatures. Unlike bone-chilling stone, a thick wooden wall always remains incredibly pleasant and surprisingly warm to the touch. This remarkable natural ability to store energy has become the strongest foundation of all monumental Scandinavian historical architecture. The thickness of the walls in these vast, long houses was always calculated with precision based on vast experience with the harsh climate. Logs that were too thin and light would never have been able to retain precious heat during the incredibly long, howling winter storms. Logs that were too thick and unwieldy would have required simply colossal, superhuman efforts during long-distance transport and complex manual processing. These ingenious builders always found the perfect, carefully calibrated balance, ensuring maximum strength with absolutely optimal and reasonable labor costs. Each wooden ring of a massive log cabin became a truly impregnable and powerful bastion against the merciless northern winter frost. The massive turf roof was a truly complex, multi-layered system, ingeniously combining wood, bark, and simple earth. First, a continuous, even decking of long, thin wooden poles or smooth, prepared planks was laid on sturdy rafters. On top of this, even wooden surface, large pieces of flexible birch bark were laid in an overlapping pattern, serving as simply perfect waterproofing. And only on top of this dense birch bark were incredibly heavy layers of soil laid, containing the powerful root systems of wild meadow grasses. Such an amazing roof could weigh dozens of heavy tons, pressing the entire massive log structure incredibly securely against the stone foundation. The living wild grass on the high roof continued to grow tenaciously, actively absorbing all excess moisture after the heaviest downpours. Long roots intertwined tightly into an incredibly strong network, completely preventing the heavy layer of earth from sliding down the slopes. During severe summer droughts, the turf might turn quite yellow, but in the fall, its vibrant life would inevitably revive. This truly unique ancient biotechnology ensured the building decades of absolutely flawless service without the need for complex major repairs. The vast roof literally became an organic extension of the surrounding harsh landscape, blending completely with the wild northern nature. Any interior smooth wall paneling, if present in the house at all, was made exclusively from smooth, planed, dry boards. The living wood eagerly absorbed the thick scents of smoke, cooked food, and resin, creating a truly unique and cozy aroma in the home. Over time, the smooth wooden surfaces darkened significantly, acquiring a very noble and deep hue under the constant influence of soot. This remarkable dark patina served as excellent additional protection against wood-boring insects and the destructive dampness of the basement. The thick walls absorbed like a sponge the long history of many glorious generations of one vast and mighty family. The incredible symbiosis of wood and earth allowed the Vikings to successfully settle the most inhospitable and cold territories of all of Northern Europe. These wonderful materials were always literally at hand, requiring only incredible, colossal diligence for their complex processing. The unique architecture of the Longhouse became a true triumph of powerful practicality over the harsh forces of wild northern nature. The immense experience of the ancestors was always carefully and strictly passed down to young builders, along with the first heavy carpentry tools. The enormous house stood as a truly monumental and impregnable fortress, reliably protecting fragile human life from the icy breath of the merciless winter. The complex interior layout of the huge, long house always amazed with its incredible thoughtfulness and absolutely strict functionality. The vast, elongated wooden space was never a simple, chaotic jumble of household items and numerous sleeping places. It was very clearly and logically divided into several key functional zones, each with its own strict purpose. Invisible psychological boundaries were always defined by the arrangement of massive support pillars, the central hearth, and light wooden partitions. Such skillful zoning made it possible to organize a comfortable life for several dozen people under one enormous roof with incredible success. The very center of the enormous building was traditionally and invariably the main living and reception area for hosting honored guests. It was here that the largest, brightest, and incredibly hot section of the open, constantly burning hearth was always located. In this most comfortable area were the host's cozy sleeping quarters, richly decorated benches, and incredibly massive wooden tables. Here, lively evening feasts took place. The community's most important matters were discussed at length, and ancient epic sagas were recounted. The bright light and intense heat made this part of the enormous house the true center of social activity for the entire large settlement. The precise placement of the numerous people inside the vast house strictly and unquestionably corresponded to their status and actual position in society. The closer a warm sleeping place was to the center of the vast hall, the more respected its owner was considered to be. The powerful master of the house and his family invariably occupied the warmest and most draft-protected recesses. Ordinary servants and workers were always situated closer to the cold entrances or in the cold utility areas at the ends of the building. The wooden architecture literally and very clearly reflected the entire complex social hierarchy of the Scandinavian world of that harsh era. The most important entrance areas, or covered vestibules, served as critically important and absolutely essential protective thermal barriers. Here, people always left their wet, heavy outerwear, snow-covered cold shoes, and the heaviest, dirtiest work tools. The spacious vestibule completely prevented street dirt and excess dampness from entering the clean, warm living area of the longhouse. The sharp and severe temperature drop in this dark vestibule forced everyone to move very quickly and not linger at all. The perfect design of this entire entrance area reliably protected the main, vast room from being completely chilled by icy winds. The vast, dark upper space directly beneath the thatched roof also served a strictly defined and very important practical purpose. People constantly hung clothes, fishing nets, and bundles of medicinal herbs to dry on the massive wooden crossbeams. In the thick, acrid smoke, huge hams and fatty fish were perfectly and thoroughly smoked, turning into long-lasting provisions. This acrid smoke served as the most reliable natural preservative, perfectly protecting any food from spoiling during the long winter. Thus, even the most uncomfortable, smoke-filled space was always used by people to its fullest, 100% practical advantage. Spacious sleeping platforms and wooden benches along the long walls served not only for sleeping, but also as spacious hidden storage systems. Beneath the thick wooden slats of the large beds were huge closed boxes for personal belongings and various valuables. This ingenious solution allowed the wide central aisle to be completely cleared for the numerous inhabitants of the dwelling to move about freely. Hidden from prying eyes, these massive chests kept fabrics, heavy jewelry, and beautiful festive clothing incredibly safe. Ideal compactness was the most important and unshakable principle of Scandinavian wooden interiors in any historical era. The overall dimensions of the enormous house strictly and unquestionably determined the number of people who could safely survive the winter. Any overcrowding immediately led to appalling unsanitary conditions, a catastrophic lack of air, and the incredibly rapid spread of infections. Strict order and iron discipline perfectly compensated for the lack of personal space and the incredibly harsh living conditions of northern life. The cold architectural logic of the ancient Viking era still amazes many modern engineers with its incredible conciseness. The vast dwelling functioned like a reliable Swiss watch, where every tiny cog was always precisely in its place. The endlessly long northern winter always dictated its own incredibly harsh rules for organizing all aspects of daily domestic life. When the short daylight hours were drastically reduced to just a few hours, all life moved entirely inside the thick wooden walls. Lighting the vast, elongated, and heavily smoke-filled space invariably became one of the most pressing technical challenges for all inhabitants. The very dim light from the central open hearth was often completely insufficient for performing complex and delicate craftwork. Experienced craftsmen constantly had to seek out other additional sources of dim, artificial light for their essential domestic needs. The most basic and reliable portable source of dim light was a very primitive oil lamp, skillfully carved from soft stone. People generously poured rendered thick marine animal fat or fragrant fish oil into small, hollowed-out recesses. Tightly twisted pieces of dry moss or scraps of old linen cloth soaked in this oil served as simple wicks. Such heavy lamps produced a very dim, constantly flickering flame that smoked incredibly heavily and emitted a distinctive, extremely pungent odor. However, in the unbearable conditions of the dark polar night, even this very dim, flickering flame became a true, long-awaited salvation. Very long wooden torches made from dry, resinous pine or light birch were frequently and widely used as an excellent alternative. These long torches were securely inserted into special, tall, wrought iron holders, which could be easily carried from place to place. They burned incredibly brightly, but, unfortunately, burned out very quickly, requiring constant, uninterrupted attention and frequent replacement. Sparks flying in all directions from falling embers constantly posed a very serious fire hazard inside the dry wooden structure. The burning, dangerous torches were usually tended by young or elderly people who were not engaged in heavy, exhausting physical labor. The complex process of making real candles from expensive beeswax was always considered an incredible, unthinkable luxury, accessible only to the wealthiest jarls. Pure yellow wax was valued literally as highly as gold and was used sparingly only on the most special and grand ceremonial occasions. The constant, acute lack of bright sunlight and clean, fresh air always took a heavy toll on everyone's overall physical condition. However, the absolute and constant engagement in heavy manual labor left absolutely no time for idle melancholy or winter gloom. The incredible cramped conditions and the shared, difficult daily life constantly demanded incredible angelic patience and enormous respect for the personal space of one's neighbors. Any conflicts that arose within the vast house were always resolved as quickly as possible and with great fairness by the head of the large and extended family. Unquestionable, strict discipline was the most essential condition for the survival of the entire large community within the enclosed wooden space. Bright rays of sunlight streaming through all the open windows were excellent for combating mold and harmful dampness in the far corners. During these beautiful hours, the inhabitants tried to spend as much time as possible outdoors, actively tending to their farm. Very short walks in the bitter cold effectively and reliably hardened the human body before the next seemingly endless night. Life in such a smoky and cramped twilight demanded immense inner, superhuman strength and incredible psychological endurance. The harsh existence of the early Vikings was utterly devoid of any romance, consisting of incredibly hard daily labor for the sake of physical survival. The bright moments always lay solely in the simplest joys, the intense warmth of the fire, very hearty food, and fascinating long stories. The huge longhouse invariably became their entire world, an incredibly reliable fortress amidst the raging, icy desert. The faint light of a stone oil lamp timidly dispelled the darkness, giving everyone hope for the imminent arrival of the bright spring sun. In the incredibly harsh, icy climate of Scandinavia, warmth was not merely an abstract physical parameter, but the most valuable resource. Unrestricted access to any sources of living heat was strictly regulated by the complex social structure of Viking-era society. Inside each huge longhouse, the distribution of comfortable, warm zones incredibly clearly and vividly reflected the invisible pyramid of power. The higher a person stood on this social ladder, the much warmer and much brighter their comfortable sleeping place was. This glaring inequality was always perceived by people as an absolutely natural, correct, and completely unshakable law of the universe. The owner of the huge house, a powerful jarl, or a wealthy bond always occupied the most honorable place right in the center of the hall. His enormous carved bed was situated at a perfectly ideal distance from the hottest part of the huge open hearth. There was absolutely no thick, suffocating smoke here, but there was always an abundance of the pure, radiant energy of the bright, burning fire. The master always slept on the finest, thickest fur blankets and had direct access to the best imported woven sheets. His high status was further emphasized by the incredible richness of the carvings on the massive supporting pillars surrounding his enclosed sleeping alcove. The coldest and most drafty spots near the outer end walls were always reserved for the powerless and the lowly servants. Here, the life-saving warmth from the hearth dissipated completely, giving way to the icy breath of the frozen, massive earthen ramparts. These slaves constantly had to sleep on armfuls of prickly straw, covering themselves with old, tattered hides or ragged, holey blankets. They would very often press themselves tightly against one another to somehow preserve the crumbs of precious body heat. Survival on these icy outskirts of the vast longhouse always required incredible physical endurance and years of harsh acclimatization. The arduous duty of constantly maintaining the fire in the massive hearth was also always distributed in strict accordance with social status. The long task of chopping heavy firewood in the cold and the dirty work of clearing the ashes fell upon the shoulders of the most powerless and unfortunate members of the family. The noble masters merely strictly supervised this process, carefully monitoring the even distribution of fuel throughout the long night. This absolute control over the fire meant direct control over life and death itself in the harsh northern winter. This power once again underscored the absolute, unquestionable authority of the head of the mighty clan over all the inhabitants of the vast building. All guests arriving at the Longhouse were seated in strict accordance with their actual rank and the true purpose of their visit. The most honored guest might immediately be given a seat closer to the fire, demonstrating to all the highest degree of the famous northern hospitality. Ordinary traveling merchants or poor travelers always had to make do with cold spots at the very edge of the farthest living quarters. Generously providing hot food and lodging was always considered a sacred, unshakable duty of any free, ancient Scandinavian. To deny shelter to a freezing poor traveler always meant inviting the terrible wrath of the harsh, merciless northern gods. The strict hierarchy of warmth was invariably reflected even in the quality of warm clothing and textiles used for a comfortable night's sleep. Wealthy nobles could easily afford the finest wool, imported silk, and the softest down from Arctic birds. Ordinary poor people always wrapped themselves in incredibly coarse, prickly yarn and very stiff, dirty hides of old animals. This striking visual distinction of status was incredibly noticeable even during moments of complete rest and nighttime repose. Pleasant warmth was invariably a tangible measure of immense success, great wealth, and influence in early Viking society. A deep understanding of this complex structure greatly helps us to better comprehend the psychology and harsh daily life of the ancient northern peoples. The warmth of a huge bonfire was, for them, the very embodiment of life, safety, and the prosperity of the entire mighty clan. The engineering genius of the ancient architects served not only physical comfort, but also the maintenance of the strictest order. Wooden architecture and a complex society were always intertwined into a single, inseparable knot, creating this unique culture. This remarkable culture allowed the fearless Vikings to leave an indelible, immense mark on the world's history of architecture and survival. We have explored how architectural genius and incredible endurance helped the Vikings survive the harshest and longest winters. Every element of their massive dwellings, from the earthen rampart to the turf roof, served to protect them from the merciless, icy cold. This is a story about the triumph of the human spirit over the elements, about iron discipline, and the complex social structure of the North. Please suggest topics in the comments for future videos that you'd like to see in our upcoming historical episodes. And don't forget to subscribe to our channel so you don't miss out on new, exciting, and unique historical investigations.